Hello and welcome to a new episode of our weekly show, Global Insight. I'm your host, Hasan Youness. The selection of London to host the 2012 Summer Olympics over Paris intensified the conflict between France and the UK over EU policies dealing with agriculture, taxation, and foreign affairs. China threatened a trade war with the US after the US Senate passed a resolution that hurt Beijing's chances to host the Summer Olympics in 2000. In many cases, the host country representatives are willing to pay lavish gifts to the organizing committee as a form of bribery, as exemplified by Qatar's Mohammed bin Hammam, who was found guilty of bribing presidential election voters just months after he helped secure the 2022 World Cup for his Gulf homeland. The rivalry between Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Qatar is reflected in sports, so it's not weird to know that Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani bought a 70% share of Paris Saint-Germain, or to see the logo of Qatar Foundation on the jerseys of Real Madrid, AC Milan, Paris Saint-Germain, Arsenal, and Qatar's Airways logo on Barcelona's jerseys. What are the underlying reasons for such enthusiasm for buying such teams, sponsoring them, and paying billions of dollars to have the exclusive right of broadcasting their matches? Is there a correlation between the Brazilian unrest and its hosting of the 2014 FIFA World Cup? How was the political conflict between Russia and Poland reflected in the 2012 Euro Cup? In addition, how were the Egyptian conflicts apparent in Port Said accidents? To what extent are the Lebanese political conflicts apparent in different sports? In this episode, we will explore deep insights about these questions, among others related to sports and politics, with Dr. Anwar Kawtharanee. Dr. Anwar is the Dean of the School of Business at the Lebanese International University, in addition to being a sports analyst and a researcher. Hello, Dr. Anwar. I'm glad to have you in this episode. And we will be joined via link from Beirut with Mr. Rabi Hamdan, who is an AFC licensed coach, in addition to a phone call with Ms. Siham Harati, who is the Honorary Consul of Brazil in Lebanon. And we will have a phone call from Mr. Paul Roustom, who is a Lebanese football player. Before shedding lights about the interaction between sports and politics, we will start with a report and then go back to our discussion.
Sports and politics have become inseparably intertwined. From the volatile nationalism of international soccer right to human rights controversies surrounding the Beijing Olympics, sport is both an important factor in political discussion and is shaped by the wider political environment. The Olympics, the cornerstone of international sporting competition, and the International Olympic Commission have always shown pride in keeping politics and sport separate. Contained in the Olympic Charter are passages that attempt to keep the Games apolitical. However, the infighting between countries to be selected as the Games hosts can be vicious, and the political repercussions can be highly seen. Former French President Jacques Chirac picked over London's selection over Paris as the host of the 2012 Summer Games intensified the squabbles between France and the United Kingdom over EU policies dealing with agriculture, taxation, and foreign affairs. China, on its part, threatened a trade war with the United States after the US Senate passed a resolution that hurt Beijing's chances to host the Summer Olympics in 2000. In many cases, the host country representatives are willing to pay lavish gift to organizing committee as a form of bribery. For example, as part of its winning bid to host the 1998 Winter Olympics, Japan promised to build a new high-speed rail line between Tokyo and Nagano, the site of the game. Boycotts of international sporting events, especially the Olympics, are quite common, as seen by the US and many Western countries boycotting the 1980 Moscow Games, subsequently followed by the USSR and Eastern Bloc members not participating in the 1984 Los Angeles Games. Individual athletes can also boycott an event because of politics. For instance, in the 2004 Athens Games, Iranian judo champion Arash Mir Ismaili refused to compete against Israeli Ehud Vaks. Another political implication of the sports is exhibited via the Brazilian demonstrations. When FIFA rolled into Brazil with the Confederation Cup earlier this month, it thought the two-week tournament might be chaotic, but it can't have imagined the chaos would verge on revolution. The anger that erupted across Brazil did not start because of a multi-billion-dollar state investment in new football stadium, but with hospitals, schools and public transport all being underfunded. Unethical conduct can be witnessed in many sports. Italian police have seized documents from Italian and foreign clubs, including 18 in the top league, as part of an investigation into tax evasion and money laundering involving player transfers. At least 15 nations in 2012 had match-fixing investigations involving hundreds of people. Europol revealed that some 680 matches, including World Cup and European Championship qualifiers and 2 Champions League games, had been fixed. Some Arab nations' enthusiasm in sponsoring, owning stock in some European teams, and even hosting major events has political roots, according to many commentators. Abu Dhabi Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan took over Manchester City in 2008, and by 2012, the club won its first Premier League title in 44 years. Sheikh Tamim bin Ahmed Al Thani bought a 70% share of Paris Saint-Germain through his Qatar Sports Investments company. In the context of sports briberies, FIFA's bribery scandal spread beyond allegations on the presidential elections to include the selection of Qatar to host the 2022 World Cup. There was alleged evidence that Qatar has bought the right to buy the world's biggest sports event.
Hello, Dr. Anwar Kawtharanee. In fact, many commentators and many analysts might find the correlation between sports and politics a bit weird. How can you explain this correlation or this relation between sports and politics?
First, thank you for hosting me on your prestigious show, and
just
to correlate the ideas, the Dean of the School of Education rather than business, sir.
Sorry, I've said the School of School of Education.
It's both the same, neighbors. Now, so if we have to start the correlation between sports and politics, first we have to know exactly the norm and the definitions of these. Sports and politics tend to go into a couple of pillars. When we talk about sports policy, when we talk about globalization, when we talk about nationalism in sports, when you talk about the political economy, and you have to also talk about the insight and the global perspective of politicians into sports, and you also have to look exactly sports personalities involved in the sports, the politics and policies. So it is a kind of a pillar, all tangled together, and in this way, this merging of pillars brings about, it's a marriage, an evil marriage, like we can call it, and at the same time that needs to be reorganized, where you can have politics come visit sports rather than the interference.
We have to rearrange the relation between these two concepts, you mean?
Absolutely.
To avoid the conflict between them.
Absolutely, because there is much interference rather than intervention from politics into sports and vice versa. And you can never distinguish.
Can we have a healthy interference or interference from politics to sport? Can it be healthy?
Absolutely. You can intervene from politicians into sports. It has been done in many cases. As we said, if you look at the policies of the definition of exactly the interaction between politics and sports, you look at the word, one of the pillars, it's the rules and regulations of the policies. Definitely you need to embargo on your policies. Here comes the politicians. They can come up, because when you set up a new criteria for policies, you need the politicians to be involved, because it retracts to the environment. This is a healthy one, but people misuse this intervention for their own personal welfare. That's what we mean by the interference rather than the intervention of politicians into sports.
How can sports be an arena for exercising your power as a nation?
This comes under the pillar of nationalism. because as we said, we gave it different types of criteria and different type of populism. Nationalism brings about one healthy correlation of the whole
Theoretically,
nation.
it has to be healthy, but on the ground, it's not being that healthy.
We can give examples, so
Yeah,
many
please.
examples. Ivory Coast in the World Cup, and its first time in its World Cup in 2002, when it has inception there, it was all corrupted with civil war out there. Everybody laid arms, and everybody rushed. Instead of the machine guns, bullets, and guns, they all went for the remote control to watch country of Ivory Coast do exceptional
It
well.
has united them
So
at
it
that
united the nation out there. This is one. There are other areas. If you look at Senegal, former colony to France in 19, I believe, 2002 as well, in the opening. Unrest in Senegal, Senegal being a former colony to France, that hatredism among itself, it united the nation that day when the whole kind of a shock. Senegal beat France as holders. So these are two prime examples that you can see. Yes, sports on the nationalism unite. And one final example, just months ago, nobody hears of Taiwan. When you talk about Taiwan, the first lady in Taiwan won the McDonald's LPGA golf tournament, and Taiwan is not on the map of sports. This united the whole nation. Yes, you need the bread of the nation when it comes around a leader for such a case.
Taking into consideration the Arab example, many nations are being that keen and enthusiastic to sponsor, as I've said in my introduction, to sponsor prestigious teams, to have the exclusivity to broadcast their matches, their tournaments, and they are paying billions of dollars. Do you think that this is a healthy indicator, or it's a reflection of the negative rivalry which is taking place between these countries?
It's the two sides of a coin. I can explain it here.
Please.
But let's look at when Lebanon played South Korea here in the municipality in Beirut. I don't think I've ever seen a nation in our turmoil, in the political turmoil we're going through, in a united nation that night. And the president that day arrived into the stadium.
Sure.
So this united Lebanon, it was one hell of a victory for us, and it shocked Asia. Lebanon being the third world host in the world. Now, you come to the second part of your question. Yes, when I said it's two faces of the coin, you have to look at the goals of the government of a tiny nation where it expands and extends its hands towards Europe, what in return it gets. This can be seen as a rivalry in the nation itself. As you just said, Abu Dhabi, Etihad, sponsor Manchester City. You look at the Emirates Airlines, the Dubai's, they sponsor both the Emirates, the Arsenals, and the AC Milans. So the day Arsenal play Manchester City, what happens? It's a kind of a two-way go between the two tiny Emirates. Now, and when the Manchester City won the league, you could see partying all night long down in Abu Dhabi. So this reflects positively.
We discovered deep insights about the Qatari and the Emirates intervention in depth, in fact, in the sponsorship and in the exclusivity in having the rights to broadcast such games. But I'd like to welcome Mr. Rabia Hamdan, who is an AFC licensed coach. In fact, Mr. Rabia, and out of your observations, first I'd like to welcome you definitely. Out of your observations, have you witnessed certain incidents in which politics has had negative influence on sports?
First of all, you may let me salute you and your guest, Dr. Kawtharanee, in the studio. And it's a great opportunity to all of us to spotlight this issue of sports and politics. Because nowadays we should differentiate between the old school and the new school, the old football and the modern football. As you said, and as your guest said, the modern football equal money, equal investments, like we see some Arab countries doing a lot of investment in Europe. However, the old school of football, it's when a player, when a team, when a manager play for the shirt, not for the money. Yes, so that's the difference. Now we see there's no more loyalty from any player, from any manager to his team. People now are loyal for money. Now this is the negative point we are talking about in the modern football.
Here you are talking about the business aspect of football and of many sports actually. Can you give some incidents about the negative implication of politics on sports?
Well, politics, You know, we gave, Mr. Kawtharanee gave a lot of examples about this, and he talked about the World Cup in 2002 between France and Senegal, and how Senegal won the game 1-0 in that time. And as you said in your introduction, we talked about the game between Poland and Russia in the Euro 2012 last year. All of us, we know that Euro 2012, it's the second most important tournament event in the world after the World Cup. We all saw what happened, we all witnessed what happened between the Polish fans and the Russian fans.
The clashes which took place at that time.
Yes. And here, let me tell you something. The government in Poland let 5,000 fans from the Russian fans to make a march to the stadium, to go walking to the stadium in the middle of Poland, in Warsaw. And we all know that there's a lot of conflicts between Poland and Russia, historical conflicts, a lot of wars. I don't know how the government let those Russian fans to make a walk in the middle of Poland, a walk to the stadium.
So what happened at that time was a true reflection of the conflict between these two countries. It was reflected in the stadium at that time. Just, I'll get back to you shortly, Mr. Rabi Hamdan, but I'd like to welcome Ms. Siham Harati, who is the Honorary Consul of Brazil in Lebanon. Hello, Ms. Harati, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, hello, Dr. Hasan.
Hello. I'm glad to have you in this episode. Actually, the talk about the Brazilian right to host the FIFA World Cup next year is gaining momentum nowadays, especially with the strikes and the protests which are taking place in Brazil. The Brazilians are saying that the budget which is allocated for hosting the World Cup is over budget. In fact, there are certain areas of interest for the Brazilians and areas of concern as the social welfare issues. What's your stance regarding this?
Okay, Brazil is traditionally known as the country of soccer and samba. So Brazil's history and culture are based on samba, while the country's fame is based on soccer. So Brazil has always invested significant amounts in samba schools, not only to benefit tourists, but also because it's part of nation's culture. Essentially in all Brazilian life, soccer and samba. The same can be said for the soccer clubs, where the main distraction since early childhood is to play ball. As it's well known to all, Brazilian soccer players are considered the best and most valued in the world. Lately, Neymar was sold to Barcelona for the expensive amount of 57 million euros, making him the most expensive Brazilian player of all time. So Brazil will be hosting the 2014 World Cup, 2014 World Cup. Reason why it has invested billions in stadium and sports in infrastructures. This value should be by the money spent should be by 28 billion of reais. Now, but look, we can't forget that Brazil is today now the 5th biggest nation in the world, and catching up with this big and fast economic development that took place in the last decade is a very important challenge for public service areas such as transportation, education, and health. Brazil, that once considered a third world country, grew in all sectors, but still the government is finding difficulties in providing Brazilians their basic needs. Street demonstrations used to express public frustrations are part of the democracy. And they are taking place everywhere.
But is it justified? Are these demonstrations justified?
Excuse me?
Are these demonstrations justified?
Not totally. Not totally, because the Brazil, he needs to invest on all these sectors, not only in but the World Cup, it's a big responsibility for Brazil. So they have a fixed time to end with it, but in the other areas like health and education, They are investing every year, not just for 1 year, but just for one occasion. And as you know, contrary opinions are also part of politics. So it's a mix of the Brazilian demands and opposites of opinions in politics.
In fact,
so it's a mix of both.
Yeah. Ms. Siham Harati, I know that you have many commitments, and I'd like to thank you for your intervention and for your deep insights about this very timely topic. In fact, you are the Honorary Consul of Brazil in Lebanon. I highly thank you again. Dr. Kawtharanee, what's your stance regarding the demonstrations which have taken place, which have been taking place in Brazil? Is there a justification? Isn't football considered the panacea for the Brazilians? Why the demonstrations then?
Look, Her Excellency, the Council had pointed something very important, that this is not justified. But you have to look into the picture from the other side. In 2007, Brazil was allocated by FIFA to host the World Cup. Brazil wasted 2 years until 2009 to identify which cities in Brazil to stage the World Cup. And now from 2009 to 2014, all the economical and social problems, as you just pointed out, have been gone into empty promises and empty promises. Now in the last 100 meters to the race before the 2014, and that means a year and a half from now, a year, and we're talking of a year and a half before, FIFA has introduced some new amendments into the reconstruction of the stadia in Brazil. From a third tier of stadia, they wanted to include some highly sophisticated reconstruction of the already sent plan to FIFA. So which means extra budget, extra millions, for a simple reason which probably might indirectly affect what's going on. FIFA did spend $4 billion in promoting the World Cup in South Africa.
But some analysts are talking about corruption in the expenditure.
That's very good. Now, let's look from the side of FIFA, spending $4 billion on promoting World Cup in South Africa. Coming down to the Brazilians themselves, empty promises of hospitals, roads, schools, call it whatever, to the social benefit, all have been going to no avail. Empty promises and a corrupt government. If those improvements are to take place, the only people benefiting as a shift are the Brazilians themselves, from the top politicians, who are going to benefit from this reconstruction of the stadium. And the thing that sparked the whole issue was Platter's statement. Why are the Brazilians acting this way? In the end, it's going to be for the benefit of sports.
From a business perspective, if you want to look at the return on investment,
that's very good.
Do you think that they will have a good return on their investment, on the billions of dollars of investment if they host? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. This will not bring the hospitality, the social investment into the individual in schooling, in bringing up social justice, cutting down on corruption. All this will not bring it down. This will all go to no avail. So that's why the Brazilians came up and said, come on, where is this money going? Just for an event, roads and bricks? What about the human being?
This was the social welfare, which is the primary demand of the people, actually, despite having football as a panacea for the Brazilians.
Good. And by the way, the president of Brazil and Sepp Blatter were booed during the matches. Brazil-Japan, they were booed out there. So it seems 1 million people came down to the streets in 10 different cities. And this is going to be a huge question mark. 600,000 people are expected to visit Brazil next year. If this does not take place, FIFA will be directly punched financially.
In fact, Dr. Kawtharanee, we will have further insights about the correlation between sports and politics, but right after the break. A break and we'll be back.
Wherever those are persecuted, that place we tackle case by case.
Cases, where we believe that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Hello again to Global Insight. In fact, Dr. Kawtharanee, Qatar has been accused of buying the right to host the 2022 World Cup via Mohammed bin Hammam, and the case of bribery has been highly raised in the media. What's your stance regarding this, and is it justified? Is it worth it from a utilitarian approach, from a cost-benefit analysis? Do you think it's worth it?
Look, in such situations, you might have many detractors. And what we mean by detractors, people try to tarnish you because if you've done something great. Now, the French, because of many shortcomings in their political and their sports events, through one of the famous magazines, opened a 15-page report on such an allegation. Now, you have to look at the pros and cons of this. Yes, Mohammed bin Hammam paid a price on this, and so with other members of the FIFA ruling body. Now, you have to look at it from the two angles. Let's look at the angle of first bin Hammam. Bin Hammam has a long-standing confrontation with Sepp Blatter. But also, bin Hammam was very instrumental in having the World Cup come to Qatar. A very good instrumental individual.
Sure.
Now, he was being accused of, let's say, unquote, bribing 4 major members in the African committees
yeah.
from Nigeria, South Africa, and our country called the other 2. Now, such a case came into light. In addition to, other than Issa Hayatou, the head of the African FIFA president, we had also Jack Warner from the Caribbeans. So all this puzzle or jigsaw came together, and through certain emails that were classified, yes, there were kind of a bribery. You call it bribery, you call it a kind of a goodwill jest towards this. Well,
yeah, especially that the policy in the FIFA is zero tolerance for any unethical conduct.
That's what they did, and that's what they're trying to march. But this opened also many hidden doors in FIFA. Now, let's call it from the goodwill jest, from the Arab perspective, and whereas from the opposite perspective in the European, they call this as bribery. This led to the crumbling of major heads in the FIFA government body. So when Hammam fell down, so went other 2 to 3 big, huge heads. In such a case, this was given. And why would a nation of just very tiny, the tiniest of all, would have the World Cup staged?
Yeah.
But let's look on the opposite side. Uruguay got it in 1930, and they were just 1.7 million at that time in 1930. Switzerland got it in 1954. They were just 5 million at that time. So it's not about the size of a nation or geographically or the magnitude of the people.
Especially in a world where there is no barriers between other nations. So even if a small country is hosting, there are no barriers. People from all over the world, from the other Arab regions can take part in participating.
Absolutely right. And this comes back to my definition, one of the elements of the definition, globalization of the sports.
Which you've mentioned in the introduction.
That's very good. What's globalization for Qatar here? And here comes exactly the former head of state of Qatar. What did he do? He had 3 perspectives. One, you want World Cup, it's synonym with a magnitude and empire of media. Here came the Al Jazeera.
And the prerequisite was there, which is the Al Jazeera.
And that's one. 2, you need transportation. Qatar is a hub, which I think is, at this time of the world and financially, everybody can visit it.
Yeah.
This is one. Sorry, the second one very quickly. Construction, the state-of-the-art stadia. And third, passion, and as Qatar in Asia, a marketing place, yes, second to China comes Qatar with its passion. It's a very good global.
So you think that the prerequisites for hosting the 2022 are there in Qatar?
Absolutely.
I'd like to have the insights of Mr. Rabi Hamdan regarding the right of Qatar to host the 2022 World Cup. What are your insights, Mr. Rabi?
Well, actually, I am with Dr. Kawtharanee in every word he said. But let me tell you something regardless of your question. I want to say something that when they asked Qatar about what if Israel qualified to the World Cup, what will be your situation? What will be the Qatar said that yes, we can invite Israel, we can host them, and actually this goes unethical with our beliefs toward this nation. This is one. The other point, as you said, Mr. Youness, FIFA have zero tolerance for any unethical act. And what Qatar did, as Mr. Kawtharanee said, Qatar is nothing. It's a small country. But it have a lot of benefits. Money-wise. Now we talk about money. Everything is money. Qatar, let me go a little bit far in this.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, in this situation. Qatar is using the power of money to get everything, even politically. Even if you go to what's going on in the countries near Qatar, in Syria, in Egypt, everywhere. Even in political issues, in sports.
We will not talk about the political issues in this
Yes.
in this episode. Yeah, there are many talks that Qatar are being able to buy a revolution.
Exactly.
As the case in Syria. So definitely they can buy the right to have the World Cup.
Yes,
but you can proceed in your intervention.
Yes, and if you go a little bit, if you go inside Qatar and you see what's going on, you will see that the laborers working in constructing the stadiums and the plans they are putting, laborers are treated badly. And I made a lot of research about it. Laborers are treated badly. So I don't know what's going on. A lot of investigations should go around this this
is
issue.
from an ethical perspective. You're talking from an ethical perspective
Yes,
right now.
yes.
Do you think that the political power of a country has a say in deciding whether it will host such big event as the Olympics or the FIFA World Cup or any other big event?
Exactly.
It has a say.
Actually, this is the title of our episode. It's politics and football,
Yeah.
or let's say sports in general. Okay, political countries that have political power, they can do it. But if you go and we talk about Qatar, I told you before that Qatar is using its money power. It's using its money. Okay.
Yeah. They have their ways of exercising their bargaining power, and one of them is money. Definitely. I'd like to move back to Dr. Kawtharanee. In fact, many articles talk about the interference of sports committees in politics, as in the case of Russia, China, Italy, and Korea. Can you elaborate more, please, on this point?
Yeah, I do agree with Mr. Hamdan. Sometimes heavy politicians come in, because if you look at it, the current ruler of Qatar, Platini, and former President of France, Sarkozy, they were also instrumental in getting this into Qatar. So look at this, celebrities of politicians, the high level of panache of celebrities, of politicians, making a hand into football.
Yeah.
So this is exactly, that explains it. Now to your question.
The interference of sports committees in politics.
It has been, especially in the International Olympics, the Olympic body, we've seen this way back to the 20s and 30s. The first time you look at it is in the 50s in China. China was the People's Republic of China, and then you have China, which is currently the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China. China was accepted to represent into the Olympics. Now, in '70, the United States refused to have
the
China.
Senate at that time tried to lobby against having the right to have China the host,
the
and
Republic.
China at that time threatened that they might have a trade war with the U.S.
Good. Indonesia in 1962 in the Asian Games, refusing Israel to participate, under the pressure from China to do that. What did the IOC did? In 1964, it prohibited Indonesia to take part. So you can see
the reciprocity, maybe.
Reciprocity, you see the intervention. And one very important thing, just nearby yesteryears, in the 2002 World Cup, prior to the World Cup in 2002, by a couple of months, a Korean skater was disqualified, having been allegedly pushing an American skate competitor. This was kept. In 2002, two things happened. Politics was at the point of a sword. When Han scored the winning goal for South Korea against Italy, who plays on loan in Perugia, the first thing the president did was cancel the contract. That's the first thing. Because he believed that Italy was destroyed by who? By a nation that you can never see. That's one of the things. And the celebration of the Korean...
So the cultural ethnocentrism has a say mainly.
Yes. What did FIFA do? Nothing. Never intervened. or never interfered.
So there is a double standards.
Then another thing, when he celebrated his goal, how did he celebrate his goal? He celebrated the goal as a skater, in tribute to his compatriot 3 months ago. He was penalized for this. So you look at the double standards out here. And there are many cases and cases and cases that you can go and talk about. In 1982, Algeria beat West Germany at that time. Under the current rules, it was Algeria who will proceed to the second round. Germany lost on purpose to Austria, so not to allow Algeria to move in. FIFA, everybody knew this. It was a predicted result. FIFA stood by alone. So you see that double standards of intervention or interference into politics. And the story goes on and on and on. Why would Britain come under one flag in the Olympics and they come under different flags in FIFA? So you see inconsistency in rules from the same bodies towards sports.
And even in the year 2005, when it was announced that the summer 2012 Olympics will be hosted by the UK, Jacques Chirac had some conflicts at that time with the president of UK. To that extent, it might go. What are your insights about that?
David Cameron, not David Cameron, the one who wears glasses. I remember.
Yeah.
Yes, he almost boycotted every single thing between the French and the British at that time, and
the European Union policies were jeopardized at that time due to the conflict between these two countries.
You could see the French tabloid. They wanted every single French sportsman to leave England and to come back to France. You see, when it comes to personal interest, everybody looks at his or her own point of view. And here, what do the bodies do? They just take a blind eye. That's what they do.
Going back to Qatar's investments in the field of sports, and particularly in football, what are the underlying reasons for these tens and hundreds of billions of dollars which are being paid to own such teams, or to have a controlling stake in these teams, or to sponsor these teams? What are the underlying reasons?
You see, you have to look at a small nation and a larger nation, what impact it leaves in them. If this had been done to the United States, and when we have a lot of people buying clubs, the impact is negative. But when you look at countries like Qatar, Bahrain, the Emirates, this brings you back to the globalization market, and you talk about nationalism, both involved. Now, how do they look at it? The Qataris look at it from three perspectives: education, science, and research. By having an outreach to hubs or catalysts of club, who in return give you this. This is what they look for. Take an example. Qatar went for Barcelona. Barcelona is the most populated or supported club in the world. If Qatar foundations come in on their shirts, that means wherever Barcelona travel, this is an indirect investment
and it's
in
the
Qatar.
first time in the history of Barcelona they accept to have the brand or the logo of a commercial company. They used to pay the UNICEF to
absolutely. They were only propagators of giving out. Now they're receiving, because through financial strains in Europe. Now, after 2 years of the contract, it's not anymore Qatar Foundation. As of next year, it'll be Qatar Airways. They have a purpose to sell. They're selling the rights of Qatar, the propaganda of Qatar Airways across the world. That's from the Qatar perspective. In return, education will be involved into it. Research will be involved into it. This is exactly the benefit of what Qatar did. Look at the Emirates, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. Now, you look at the Abu Dhabis, they have Manchester City, pumping £700 in the space of 4 years to get £700. They pumped from 2008 till 2012. And
£700 million.
What did I say?
£700.
700 million pounds. It's a piece of cake. 700 million pounds into Manchester City. But the return was, City won the league as if Abu Dhabi's won the league.
Yeah.
So it's like culture.
Okay.
You're talking of personalities into politics.
So it helps in boosting maybe the sense of nationalism, which it might be lacked via the national teams.
Yes, absolutely, but it also has positiveness on expanding the grassroots of football on that particular country. And it only works, Dr. Youness, with nation and kingdoms. The smaller it is, the benefit they get rather than larger nations.
Because it will be distributed on less population.
Yes.
We will have deeper insights about these topics among many others, and some incidents which reveal the impact of politics on sports right after the break. A final break, and we'll be back.
Pollution and climate change, medicine manipulation, genetically modified food, the destruction of wildlife, and corporate exploitation. These are all part of a new terrorism threatening our future.
Eco-terrorism, global awakening to a world under threat.
Hello again to Global Insight. In fact, I'd like to start this part of the episode by having a final question addressed to my guest via link from Beirut, Mr. Rabih Hamdan. Mr. Rabih, in fact, we can tackle many incidents in which we can find a correlation between sports and politics, and you've talked about the Polish-Russian conflict and the clash in the 2012 European tournament or European Cup. Another incident might be the Port Said accident. How can you elaborate about this incident and show the correlation between politics and sports?
Well, actually, we all know in Egypt there's two teams. They represent the football. There's Al-Ahli and Al-Zamalek. Both of them are the poles of football in Egypt. In the revolution in Egypt, when they overthrow the regime of Hosni Mubarak, both fans team from Al-Zamalek and Ahli, they unified together in order to overthrow the regime. And we all know the famous expression, or it's now quoted, people want to overthrow the regime. After this scenario, there was a lot of consequences. And one of them was the Port Said accident. Unfortunately, we also happened, more than 80 persons were killed. But who's responsible? Who did all this? Yes, this is politics. This is politics and sport. This is the relation between politics and sport.
So at that time, it showed the conflict and the schism maybe in the Egyptian streets at that time, which was very tense.
Exactly. Al-Masri fans, there was a game in the Egyptian Premier League, Al-Ahli versus Al-Masri. Ahli were playing away, not in their home.
Yeah.
And we saw Al-Masri fans, they invaded the pitch, you know, the pitch where they play.
Yeah.
They invaded the pitch, and then they go straight forward to the Ahli fans, and they start killing them. This is insane. I mean, this is insane. You know, they used knives, they used weapons.
Yeah, it was a catastrophic incident at that time. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Rabih Hamdan, an AFC licensed coach, I highly thank you for your insights in this episode. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
In fact, I'd like to move to a phone call with a football player who is Mr. Paul Roustom. Hello, Mr. Paul.
Hello, how are you?
Great. I'm glad to have you in this episode, actually. As a Lebanese football player, have you witnessed certain incidents in which there was a clear interference from politics to sports?
Well, during my 14 years of career in Lebanon, there has been a lot of incidents that happened here. For example, Lebanese football by itself is something special because we are playing in amateur level and not professional or semi-professional, if you want. So the club here depends on personal investors, and as the sport in Lebanon in general, and football especially, is not very lucrative. So the investors are not very tempted to invest in football. So basically, all the clubs, there is a correlation between the clubs and ethnicity, between political parties and ethnicity in Lebanon, and thus the clubs that belongs to an ethnic party, they are financed by political persons. For example, when there are elections, these political persons or parties that that want to invest money, they invest before the elections and everything. And then 3 years later, for 3 years, they don't invest and they don't pay money and like this. So everything was fine until 2005 when Prime Minister Hariri was murdered. And during this time, from this time and until today, there is a lot of conflict between political parties in Lebanon, and this reflected on the Lebanese football.
Not only on the Lebanese football and on the Lebanese basketball, and we've seen that the Lebanese basketball tournament was stopped due to certain conflicts between the parties which are represented via two Lebanese teams, the Chonville and the other team.
Yeah, so this thing it affected a lot, and in the case of football. And in the case of football, it's very obvious because football fans they used to come in the stadiums for like for Nijmeh games. There were like 40,000 fans in the stadiums, and because of this political problems that happened, the fans were banned for like 4 years from the stadium because, for example, everyone knows that there was a problem between Hezbollah and the Future movement, and then the Hezbollah is for Shiite and Sunnite are for the Future movement. So the football fans, they were divided. Okay, I'm a Sunnite, so I follow Ansar. I'm a Shiite, I follow Nijmeh.
Yeah, Nijmeh and Ansar are two Lebanese football teams actually.
Yeah,
for our viewers in the world.
They were divided based on their ethnical party and not on their love for football, and this created a big problem in the sports, no?
Yeah, in fact, and it's being highly revealed in the Lebanese context. Mr. Paul Roustom, a Lebanese football player who has achieved stardom during the last 14 years, I highly thank you for your insights in this episode. Dr. Kawtharanee, going back to the topic, which is gaining momentum nowadays as well, which is the bribery and the bribed coaches, to what extent it's being politicized?
Oh, absolutely. This was a kind of what we called a gold mine that erupted into the case of FIFA. And in many areas. On the Europol, 680 matches in the last 4 years were found to be match fixed. 450 officials, referees, administrators around all the continents, including 15 countries. Lebanon had its share with 3 people around. Yeah, they're already detained in Indonesia. Yes, this has become, and the main proprietors behind this are 3 nations, basically the Chinese, the Russians. They play a very, very huge role in this particular area. And it's been renowned from facts and figures that if you want to control football, buy the club. And this is what absolutely the highest mafias that buy football clubs are in Bulgaria, in former Yugoslavia, in that area. And the Chinese are not very far away. The gangs, the mafias, call it whatever you want, they control football with match fixing.
And there are some articles which talk about legitimizing your money or money laundry, and it's being invested in football, especially in Russia. So there is a competition between the money laundry and investment in football and the petrodollars from the other side, from the Arab region. So
this came into view after 9/11, when all the concentration was now going for terrorism and counter-terrorism. Football took a second stage and its investigation, and now people saw here an opening to make the extra and extra and extra. And imagine in 2002. Yes, Ghana's goalkeeper, Mark Kingston, was provided with $300,000 to lose on a match. And countless, according to Europol's investigation, things that really make you go bizarre. No, this is exactly a kind of a very nice velvet on the top, what a rotten structure underneath. So you believe things were really going, and I think Sepp Blatter and his team have a huge task at hand, because we have a huge, they're playing with mafias, they're playing with ring lords, they're playing with, call them whatever you want. It's very difficult to control this stuff.
Besides FIFA and besides certain committees, what regulatory bodies can you propose as a researcher actually for regulating, for censorship maybe?
Now, we went back to the definition. Political science, the communities and ethic committees. This goes back to the community, the committee. Nationalism, when you start nationalism, and there's one thing you have to start, the social theory. You go with the social theory, and for people who do not know what social theory is, the development of the social community, the advancement of the community, all integrated. And this has to go with kind of ethic committee, grounded. I'm giving you a theoretical.
Yeah, it is theoretical.
Okay.
Maybe on the ground we will always have deviations from this from the theoretical
political
approach.
science, nationalism and social theory. Integrate all these three, you get a solution to curb or bring down bribery and all this kind of mess in sports. Not only football, by the way, but
in different
sports fields.
Do you think that we might approach such solution, bearing in mind all the context in which these sports are being
violated?
Yeah,
I think they're already on the way, with Europol now revealing this huge amount of games, 680. 380 in Europe, 300 outside Europe, 450 officials. Now, to name these through their phones, through network, and to come up with this in the space of 4 years, that's credibility for Europol. FIFA has granted Europol with a very high amount of money to support this, and it's done an extra very good job, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's much more beneath that.
To end this episode in a positive manner, you said that the impact of the nations which are interfering maybe positively in their investments worldwide in buying certain teams or having a controlling stake in their teams is that they create a culture of sports in their country and they plant the grassroots.
That's right.
Do you anticipate that in some countries, as the Arab countries, this is being accomplished in the Emirates, in Qatar and in Bahrain maybe?
I believe Qatar and Bahrain are doing positively with the Emirates. Qatar will be joining the World Cup for the first time in 2022. But between now 2013 and 2022, the vast amount of professional players coming in, the vast amount of structural professionalism coming in, and the vast amount of clubs in Europe having Arab clubs as feeders, this will bring up a very good structure of professional sports development for those people. Yes, they're going in the right direction. We have to always be positive.
Yeah, definitely.
As I said, some people might be very good detractors in seeing the negatives, but let's look at the positives.
The negative side is there, and it has been revealed in this episode, but there is always a sense of optimism which has to be apparent as well. Dr. Anwar Kawtharanee, the Dean of the School of Education at the Lebanese International University and the sports analyst and researcher, I highly thank you for your deep insights in this episode. And I'd like to thank again Mr. Paul Roustom, who is a Lebanese football player who joined us via phone, and Ms. Siham Harati, who is the Honorary Council of Brazil in Lebanon, and Mr. Rabi Hamdan, who is an AFC affiliated coach who joined us via link from Beirut. In fact, the political conflicts are prevailing in many regions in the world, and unfortunately this impact is leaving its toll on sports as well. Hoping that there might emerge a regulatory body to decrease the impact of politics on sport, I arrive to an end in this episode, and I'd like to kindly ask you to stay tuned to Global Insight for further episodes. Thanks for watching us.